Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Clara Johnson was nervous as she walked into the large interview room of Hamilton and Company. The walls were lined with austere portraits of founders, and the air smelled of success and authority. Every step she took echoed her doubts. The recruiter, a man with a condescending smile, didn't even bother to shake her hand properly. From the very first minutes, he seemed to be looking for the slightest flaw, pointing out every hesitation, every awkwardness. His questions were laced with sarcasm, his remarks dripping with contempt. Clara felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her head up, breathing gently so as not to panic. "Do you really think you're up to this job?" he asked with a mocking sneer. Clara, in a firm but polite voice, replied, outlining her experience and skills, but each word seemed to hit an invisible wall. Suddenly, a door opened behind the recruiter. An elegant man with a penetrating gaze and a reassuring smile entered the room. The atmosphere changed immediately. The mockery stopped. Clara looked up and recognized the man, surprised herself. It was David Johnson, the company's general manager, who had arrived earlier than expected to oversee the interviews. The recruiter paled at the sight of David. His sarcasm froze, his posture became hesitant. Clara felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction rise within her. The roles had just been reversed. What had begun as a humiliation was about to turn into an unexpected lesson. Clara Johnson took a deep breath before walking through the glass doors of Hamilton and Company headquarters. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, reviewing her experiences, rehearsing her answers, and imagining herself convincing the recruiter of her abilities. Upon arrival, the reception was cold. The assistant, polite but distant, invited him to sit in the waiting room. The furniture was modern, but the atmosphere was oppressive. Abstract paintings adorned the walls, seeming to judge anyone who dared to sit there. When the recruiter, Mr. Clarkson, finally entered, his smile failed to mask the contempt in his eyes. He looked her up and down as if she were just another candidate. "So, Miss Johnson, do you really think you have what it takes to work here?" he asked sarcastically. Clara felt a chill run through her, but she remained calm. She patiently explained her background, her past experiences, and the projects she had completed. But Clarkson kept interrupting, criticizing her choice of words, her body language, and even her appearance. With every humiliating remark, Clara felt her blood boil, but she forced herself to smile. She knew better than to lose her cool, even if the humiliation was blatant. Then, like a coup d'etat, the door opened behind Clarkson, and a man entered the room. He was elegant, imposing, and exuded a natural authority. Clarkson froze, while Clara, her eyes wide, immediately recognized David Johnson, her husband, who had just joined the company a few years ago and who, in reality, was the general manager. An icy silence filled the room. Clarkson stammered a few words of greeting, but her arrogance was gone. Clara felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. The game had changed, and she would finally have the opportunity to regain control of the situation. David Johnson walked slowly into the room, his eyes fixed on Clarkson with a quiet but sharp intensity. The recruiter, initially confident, suddenly felt the tension cut off his voice. Clara, for her part, remained silent, watching her husband with a mixture of astonishment and relief. "Clarkson," David said in a firm but calm voice. "I think you're forgetting something important." Clarkson blinked in confusion. Mr. Johnson, David didn't give him time to justify himself. "I am the general manager of this company, and Miss Johnson is my wife." Clarkson's cheeks flushed. Every mocking word he'd uttered a few minutes earlier now seemed to hit him hard. He stammered, searching for words, but no apology came naturally. Clara felt a small smile play on her lips. The humiliation she had suffered a few moments earlier was now turning against her tormentor. She stood up, her back straight, and spoke in a confident voice. "Mr. Clarkson, I think you need to rethink how you treat candidates. Respect and consideration are essential in this business." David approached, placing a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder, as if to emphasize that she was no longer alone in this situation. Clarkson, completely unsettled, bowed slightly, unable to meet the CEO's gaze. All right, he murmured. I understand. Clara sat down again, this time confidently. The rest of the interview took place under David's watchful eye. Clarkson, now silent and sheepish, merely noted a few points without ever noticing a single flaw in Clara. At the end of the interview, David turned to his wife and whispered with a slight smile. You handled that perfectly. Clara felt a warmth of satisfaction and pride fill her. Humiliation had been transformed into triumph. But she knew this incident was only the beginning. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Hamilton & Co. offices was different. Whispers spread from office to office. Everyone had heard about the previous day's incident. Clarkson, the arrogant recruiter, no longer dared to look up when someone walked by. Even colleagues who had once admired him for his confidence were beginning to doubt his authority. Clara, for her part, had regained her calm and her routine. But she could feel the looks of the employees, some curious, others admiring. She knew that her position had just changed. From a simple candidate who had been mistreated, she was now a respected woman, supported by the general manager himself. Clarkson, unable to accept his defeat, tried to make amends by proposing more effective recruitment strategies to David. But David, with his impassive gaze and legendary calm, was not fooled. Clarkson, I think we need to rethink your methods. Respecting the candidates is the bottom line. Your remarks yesterday were unacceptable. The recruiter looked down, unable to protest. Clara watched silently, quietly savoring her revenge. Every word David said seemed to push him further down. Later that day, David asked Clara to follow him to his office. Once inside, he closed the door and looked at her with a knowing smile. Clara, you didn't just handle the situation, you showed everyone what respect and dignity mean. Clara smiled, but she knew some people like Clarkson wouldn't give up so easily. The fight to preserve her integrity had only just begun, and she had to stay on her guard. Meanwhile, in her corner, Clarkson was already beginning to think of ways to recover her reputation, unaware that every attempt would only strengthen Clara and David's position. Despite the public humiliation of the previous day, Clarkson wasn't ready to give up his reputation or influence within the company. In his office, he nervously typed at his keyboard, sending subtle emails aimed at discrediting Clara with certain colleagues and department heads. Each sentence was calculated to sow doubt about his competence and his ability to handle pressure. But Clarkson was unaware of two essential things. Clara had earned the quiet respect of several employees influential thanks to his dignity and calm. David Johnson, as CEO, had already taken measures to monitor any attempts at sabotage against she. The next day, Clara felt the first waves of tension. Some colleagues seemed hesitant to speak to her, others looked at her curiously, wondering how she would react. She quickly realized that Clarkson was trying to manipulate opinion around her. Rather than be intimidated, Clara decided to act strategically. She organized her tasks efficiently, ensuring that every project she handled reflected her professionalism and dedication. The results spoke for themselves. Her reports were impeccable, her presentations clear and precise, and her colleagues began to notice her competence. Clarkson, frustrated, watched his plan fail at every step. Every attempt to tarnish Clara's image backfired, further exposing his own weaknesses and past arrogance. One afternoon, David called Clarkson into his office, his tone calm but icy. Clarkson, I have been informed of some efforts to discredit Clara. This must stop immediately. We value respect and professionalism here, not petty games. Clarkson tried to defend herself, but David left no room for excuses. The implicit threat in his gaze was enough to let Clarkson know that her days of manipulation were numbered. For her part, Clara watched the scene discreetly from her office, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She knew she had just reached a key milestone. Not only had she proven her worth, but she had also shown that no one could destabilize her with impunity. However, she felt deep down that Clarkson wasn't going to give up so easily. The real showdown had only just begun. A few days after David's warning, Clarkson decided he needed to strike harder to regain control. His plan, to sabotage an important project Clara was involved in by surreptitiously altering data in a crucial report, hoping to blame her for a mistake. Clara, focused on her work, suspected nothing. She was preparing a strategic presentation for a key client, and every detail counted. Her organizational skills and professionalism were her strengths, but Clarkson was banking on the stealth of his sabotage to trap her. The day of the presentation arrived. Clara confidently presented her project, explaining every number and strategy clearly. But when it came time to present some financial data, an error appeared on the screen. Clarkson, sitting in the shadows, smiled triumphantly. David, however, had anticipated that Clarkson might try something. Before the meeting, he had reviewed all of Clara's reports and noticed anomalies in the original files, suspicious changes that only someone with access to certain documents could make. He immediately intervened, revealing to everyone that the mistake had not been Clara's, but the result of external manipulation. Clarkson suddenly felt trapped, unable to justify his actions to his colleagues and the CEO. Clara, realizing that David had discovered the scheme, remained calm. She resumed the presentation as if nothing had happened, correcting the figures and explaining the strategy confidently. The meeting ended successfully, and the clients were impressed by her professionalism and mastery. After the meeting, David placed his hand on Clara's shoulder and whispered, "Well done. Not only did you protect the project, but you also showed everyone who is truly competent here." Clarkson, humiliated and helpless, left the room without a word. But in his eyes, Clara could read a dangerous determination. He wouldn't give up so easily. For Clara, this victory boosted her confidence. She now knew she could face any attack, but she also understood that the real fight for her place and respect was only just beginning. After his glaring failure at the presentation, Clarkson realized that a direct attack would no longer work. He decided to change his strategy, undermine Clara's reputation through more subtle means, sowing doubt in informal conversations and manipulating colleagues' perceptions. Every coffee break, every hallway conversation, became an opportunity for him to slip in ambiguous remarks about Clara's luck or her supposed inexperience in certain areas. His insinuations were discreet, but enough to raise doubts among some of the more naive employees. Clara, attentive to the dynamics of the office, immediately sensed this strange atmosphere. Rather than be intimidated, she decided to observe carefully and understand Clarkson's intentions before acting. She knew that the slightest impulsive reaction could harm him. One day, she overheard Clarkson commenting quietly to a group of new employees. "She may have nailed the presentation, but wait until you see her next projects." Clara remained calm, but noted every detail. She began documenting every suspicious interaction, noting dates, conversations, and possible witnesses. She knew that solid evidence would be the key to countering Clarkson's insidious strategy. David, noticing that Clarkson was still trying to sow discord, reinforced his support for Clara by advising her. "Keep going as you are. Don't let your emotions dictate your actions. Observe, document, and you will have everything you need to protect yourself and expose his machinations if necessary." Clara felt a new strength within her. She understood that war was not only a matter of skill, but also of strategy and patience. Clarkson could manipulate appearances, but he could never hide his true long-term intentions. From that moment on, Clara decided to turn every attempt Clarkson made against her into an opportunity. Every mistake he made, every misplaced word, would be a testament to his own incompetence. And little by little, she began to regain control over her professional environment. After several weeks of observing Clarkson and her subtle machinations, Clara realized it was time to take action. She knew that only a well-thought-out strategy could put an end to her intimidation attempts and protect her reputation once and for all. She began by gathering all the evidence, questionable emails, meeting notes, testimonies from colleagues who had noticed Clarkson's innuendos and manipulations. Each piece of evidence was carefully catalogued and documented. She wanted nothing to be questioned when the time came. Clara then arranged to meet with David to outline her plan. Sitting in the CEO's office, she calmly explained. "David, I've gathered all the evidence of Clarkson's maneuvers. I think it's time to show everyone his true attitude. But I want to do it professionally, without leaving room for personal or emotional accusations." David smiled approvingly. "Very well thought out. The key is transparency and self-control. I will fully support you." On the chosen day, Clara asked Clarkson to present a follow-up meeting on a project he had been involved in. She also invited several key managers and colleagues, as well as David, of course. During the meeting, Clarkson tried to intimidate Clara as usual, but she remained perfectly calm. At one key moment, she subtly referred to some anomalies in the reports he had prepared, while showing the documents she had carefully kept. The evidence was irrefutable. Colleagues and superiors could see exactly how Clarkson had tried to manipulate the information to discredit her. Clarkson, caught in the act, stammered out some explanations, but it was clear that no one took him seriously anymore. David, with his natural authority, concluded the meeting. "Clarkson, it's clear that your methods do not meet the standards of this company. We will take the necessary action." Clara felt a wave of relief and triumph. Not only was her reputation intact, but she had just demonstrated to everyone that she possessed the skill, intelligence, and self-control to face any adversity. At the end of the meeting, David placed his hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You turned a humiliation into victory. I'm proud of you." Clara smiled, knowing that, despite the trials, she had earned more than just the respect of her colleagues, she had earned their self-confidence. After the meeting where Clara exposed Clarkson's maneuvers, the atmosphere within the company changed radically. Colleagues who had hesitated to support her began to look at her with respect and admiration, recognizing her strength and diplomacy. Clarkson, for his part, faced immediate repercussions for his actions. David, as CEO, took strict disciplinary action. He was demoted to a less exposed administrative position and required to complete a training program on respect and professional ethics. His attempts at manipulation had not only failed, but had also destroyed his credibility with everyone. In the weeks that followed, Clara noticed a change in the attitudes of her colleagues. Those who previously whispered criticism or doubted her abilities came to ask for advice or simply to congratulate her on her composure. The young woman then understood that she had become a role model within the company, a model of competence and resilience. David, ever present but discreet, continued to support her. He ensured that she had every opportunity to progress, but allowed Clara to shine on her own merits. One afternoon, as she was leaving her office, Clara passed Clarkson in a corridor. He avoided her gaze and barely murmured a word of greeting. Clara, in response, simply gave him a polite smile and continued on her way. She no longer needed to justify herself or retaliate. Victory had been won by her patience, intelligence, and dignity. From that moment on, Clara knew that she had not only overcome humiliation, but had also acquired a natural authority in her professional environment. Every future challenge would be easier to face thanks to this experience. With Clarkson now neutralized and her reputation firmly established, Clara began to look at the future in a new light. She no longer wanted to simply follow projects, she wanted to propose own ideas and initiatives, show their vision and actively contribute to the development of the company. She identified an area where Hamilton & Co. could improve its communication with customers and optimize its internal processes. After developing a detailed plan, Clara requested a meeting with David to present her proposals. David listened attentively, impressed by her clarity and strategic sense. "Clara, this is exactly the kind of initiative we're looking for. I want you to lead this project. Show them what you're capable of," he said encouragingly. Clara took the reins of her project with determination. She organized her team, allocated tasks, and set clear objectives. Her leadership style was inspiring, firm but fair, demanding but respectful. The results were quickly visible. Processes became more fluid, customer satisfaction increased, and her colleagues recognized her effectiveness and ability to unite a team. Clarkson, meanwhile, continued to struggle in his supporting role. He watched helplessly as Clara succeeded, seeing her influence erode more and more each day. His attempt to return to the top had failed definitively. Clara, on the other hand, was beginning to feel a real sense of self-confidence. She realized that the experience of the humiliating interview and Clarkson's shenanigans had been a catalyst. She had learned to remain calm under pressure, to observe before acting, and above all, to believe in her abilities. This professional victory was not only a revenge on Clarkson, but the beginning of a solid and respected rise in the company, based on competence and integrity. A few months after the tumultuous events, Clara Johnson had become a respected and influential figure within Hamilton and Company. Her project, which she had brilliantly led, had been a resounding success. Internal processes were optimized, communication with clients improved, and the team's productivity had significantly increased. At a general meeting, David Johnson officially announced that Clara was being given a role as senior project manager, with more autonomy and responsibilities. The colleagues applauded warmly, and Clara felt a wave of pride and recognition wash over her. Clarkson, now relegated to menial duties, watched the scene with a mixture of frustration and resignation. He had learned the hard way that contempt and manipulation never lead to lasting success. Clara, on the other hand, had demonstrated that patience, competence, and integrity are worth far more than cunning or arrogance. After the meeting, David approached Clara, a knowing smile on his lips. "You turned a humiliating situation into a real opportunity. You earned everyone's respect, and most importantly, you showed what it means to be a true leader." Clara smiled at her husband, grateful for his support, but above all proud of what she had accomplished on her own. She had faced humiliation, overcome manipulation, and today she stood at the top, respected and admired. As she left the meeting room, Clara felt ready for new challenges. She knew that in her professional life, as in her personal life, every obstacle could become a strength if one knew how to maintain one's dignity, courage, and determination. The memory of the humiliating interview was now a distant memory. That day, she had understood that true power lies in self-control and confidence in one's abilities. And so, Clara Johnson began a new chapter in her career, strong, respected, and inspiring all those around her.